Happy Friday, Hokies. As always, it's the video edition of the Friday Q&A. I'm Robert Bateman, joined alongside by our lead analyst and columnist, Chris Coleman. Behind the set is Nick Brown. Now, before we jump into it, yesterday we had a video with Philip Montgomery, the new offensive coordinator for Virginia Tech. Feel free to check that out. We'll talk a little bit more about it today. Ready to hop into it?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so our first question comes from Billster, who wants to know, in the NIL era, is it possible to build a competitive mindset? With players even able to just switch teams every year if they're not happy or for more money? Is it possible to develop a team competitive mindset?
I think your scouting has to be thorough when you're recruiting, both at the high school level, but particularly in the portal. Why is a guy in the portal? Is he in the portal because he wants more money? Is he in the portal for playing time? But that's the same for everybody else. So I do think if you can build your team with stronger characters these days, I think there are teams that will make mistakes in terms of the players they choose to sign. Maybe Florida State was a little bit of an example of that this past season. But you've also got to remember that these guys, yes, they're naturally talented, but they get to where they get because they're driven, because they're motivated to work hard every day. So I don't think it's as big of an issue as some people make it out to be, but I do think it does require some pretty good scouting work. Virginia Tech has a high success rate in the portal, I believe, but they also signed the kid from Alabama last year who came in and immediately was in the doghouse for lack of work ethic and everything like that, and you saw him get cycled out of the program very, very quickly. So you're never going to bat 1,000 in any era, much less this one, but I think Tech's done a good job of it so far.
Now, I'm kind of curious talking about like giving guys money, especially with our own team, because we brought back a lot of returners and then still went 6-7. So what's your take on that?
I think you have to, you want to keep your team together if they're having success, and but you also have to understand what makes your team good and what are the positions you need to spend on. Right, I think Tech overspent on wide receiver last year, considering the strengths and weaknesses of the rest of the offense. I think if some of that money had been reallocated to a second running back or an extra offensive lineman, I think that would have helped Bashal Tootin carry the load. Obviously, Drones was injured, but even when he's healthy, he's not he hasn't been the most advanced passer in the world. He passes well when the running game works, and they can work the passing game off the running game. So for me, I think wide receivers are important. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I wish like Fontel Mines was an offensive line coach or a running backs coach instead of a wide receivers coach, because Virginia Tech is going to be a run heavy program. And I think Tech does have talent at wide receiver, but you have to build the offense around your quarterback's strengths and weaknesses. And I don't think Virginia Tech is a team that should go out there and throw it 30-plus times a game. I mean, I think it should be a run-heavy team with an efficient passing game around it, of course. But so it's all about how you allocate those dollars, I think.
Well, Philip Montgomery getting announced as the new offensive coordinator, so we'll see what he does with Virginia Tech's offense. And moving on, Hokie Fan 14 asked, Montgomery used "we" a lot during his podcast with you all. For example, something along the lines of, "We can come in and make Drones a polished QB." Do you get the sense he is bringing in some of his guys? If so, any idea or guess who?
I wouldn't fathom a guess right now, having not put a lot of research time into it. Some coaches talk that way. They say "we," and because they come in, they take ownership of the offense, but they want it to be a collective effort, so they start saying things like "we." Now, that being said, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. It sounds like he's going to, of course, work with the quarterbacks. He's a quarterbacks coach, but he also sounds like Pry is sort of obsessed right now with the whole walk-around coordinator type deal, and I'm not saying that's a wrong thing. So if that's the case, then there will be a separate quarterbacks coach for Virginia Tech. So is he comfortable with Brian Christ being that quarterbacks coach? Brian Christ was the assistant quarterbacks coach under Tyler Bowen in title, but in practice he was really the quarterbacks coach, I believe, as far as a technique standpoint goes. So is that something that Montgomery's comfortable with? Christ actually has had more. He's a former offensive coordinator. He's a good football coach, but he's actually had more experience coaching wide receivers pre-Virginia Tech than he has quarterbacks, as far as I can tell from his resume. So is Montgomery comfortable with that, or does he want maybe his own quarterbacks coach? I don't know. That's something we'll have to wait and see.
Well, Montgomery was a co-offensive coordinator last year with the Birmingham Stallions in the UFL. The year before that, he was at Auburn, and then he was the head coach at Tulsa before that. And we'll just keep moving on to our final question, which comes from Hof. What is the reason/logic for delays in announcing new coaching assignments?
I think they want to announce all of them at the same time. I think they've announced their main guys: offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head strength and conditioning coach, and then Mason Baggett is the associate strength coach. But all the other positions, like they've decided on their defensive staff apparently, but Pry declined to make those announcements last week. Remember, they're also, and it goes back to the last question: what if he wants to bring his own quarterbacks coach in? So maybe you see some change there. And then remember, they're rebuilding the recruiting staff also. Most of those people have left. So they're I think they've already made 1 or 2 hires there and could make another 1 or 2. I think they want to get everything, make all those hires, get it all finalized, and then make the announcements all at one time. That's instead of making them piecemeal, which
it took 46 days for Virginia Tech to hire Sam Seifkes as defensive coordinator, only 12 for Montgomery.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious because obviously Tyler Bowen getting recruited to Ohio State and leaving Virginia Tech. Do you think Brent Pry was aware that the coaching change was coming?
I think he knew that Bowen was talking to Ohio State. I don't think he knew necessarily that it was going to happen that day, but I don't think he was caught completely unawares. I think if you hire coaches you trust and are close with, he's coached with Tyler Bowen in the past. He's coached with him for 3 years at Virginia Tech. I'm confident that Bowen would have been upfront and honest about any approach from Ohio State. I don't think he was just walk in the office one day and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm leaving for Ohio State." Right, without saying I've been talking to Ohio State. So I think he was, I'm sure when he went into the process, Brent Pry already had a list in his head and was able to move pretty quickly as a result.
All right. Well, thank you guys as always for your suggestions, and be sure to check out the article edition on TechSideline.com of Chris's Friday Q&A. As always, for Nick Brown behind the set, Chris Coleman with me on set. I'm Robert Bateman, and we'll see you guys next week.